Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, where positive parenting meets well-being. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Positively Healthy Mom. I'm your host, Laura Ollinger, teen and parent wellbeing coach, and I'm super excited to introduce someone who is in my industry, does very similar work to me. So it's going to be, I think, an awesome conversation. So he's Coach Bryan to his students and his clients, but he's Bryan Goodman in Maryland. He's got two sons. He has a really cool story about how he got into this profession and what he's doing and his master's degree and all sorts of work that he's doing. So Bryan, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this.
Absolutely. I was a teacher for a long time, roughly 20 years, when, like other parents and teachers, I noticed a shift in 2021 after COVID. And I started taking a whole bunch of courses online just to kind of better myself and really just match with my students who are struggling with their social emotional learning. And by 2022, I returned to school full time to be a school counselor. That shifted at some point to be a licensed therapist as well. And because I just felt, that offered me some flexibility and really that clinical experience that I thought was going to be really awesome for my clients, but also for myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what is what is the typical client that you have, or kind of like the number one issue that you address?
The number one issue that I address is executive functioning and relationships with parents kind of like along the way. But really, that executive functioning piece is my typical clients come to me with that from the get-go. And then we kind of dive into, limiting beliefs and communication along the way, typically.
Mm-hmm. And so how do what is your approach or philosophy to helping with the executive function struggles?
Well, it's from my standpoint, I am an adult living with ADHD. And so, I experience from a different angle, what my clients are experiencing as teens and young adults. And so my approach from that side is really to kind of get to know them and really kind of look at what most of them are coming with some level of procrastination and, kind of looking at that from, you know, you have control over these choices. It's not just about time management, it's about task prioritization, and really looking at what's motivating them. So there's not any one specific thing that is going to be like, hey, this is going to work for every client. And so from my angle, it's really getting to know my clients. So some of my clients have been with me for a while now, and they're kind of on like a maintenance plans to a certain extent as they are working through, really fine tuning senior years and things like that. So it really gets me excited though.
Yeah, I love that. And I would love to hear more about how you get the parents involved and how you work with them.
Absolutely. So the typical way that I gain clients is through parents, right? It's not typical that a teenager is gonna hey, I need your help, right? But so typically I meet with a parent, and then we kind of talk about an overview of what kinds of things I work on, and then I meet with the student, student and the parent, and then just the teen to see if there's a good match, and then we all talk together. And this is a free consultation for me that takes almost an hour, but at the same time, it builds that relationship with the parent and the kid at the same time. And so that way, there's not a pressure for me to sell them on any one point, except that as soon as they leave, I'm going to send them an email, say, hey, already these are what I can see, you could, gain some help on. And then, let's get started. Some of the clients, I meet with their parents as well. And I meet with them, as a group or even just the parents. In those sessions, it's really about expectations. I
Mm,
find a lot of times that, the expectations that we have of ourselves, are certainly they're built on a variety of things, but I think they're inevitably skewed because we are the center of our universes, and it just makes it very hard sometimes to communicate. And drilling down that to parents where, hey, going to school now and being 14, 15, 16 years old is not what it was when we were that same age.
mm.
And that's can be tough.
So when you talk about expectations, are you kind of saying that the parents have their set of expectations and the teenagers kind of have their own beliefs about how things can't should be for their lives, and so that's where you're saying there's conflict, or can you kind of explain a little more?
Absolutely. I think it's not just conflict, it is almost like, miscommunication. Right now there are kids. I mean, I'm sure, you can't be living on the rock and having a teen at this point where, you know, there's this argument about 6, 7 and getting on, parents' nerves, right? And so like just by saying that, a kid knows sometimes my parents gonna get angry with me because they don't understand what it even means, right? So like that's just like, hey, that's a kid trying to get under the skin. So that's a minor thing that can blow up into something bigger. And that's why I say it's miscommunication. And oftentimes it's misunderstandings about what is the intent. I was working with a family over a year ago, and what the mom was making as suggestions, it came out in our family session that they weren't suggestions. That's what she wanted her kid to do. There was no ifs, ands, or buts when it came down to it. When we met as a family, that was it. And so she didn't say that. These were all things that she had suggested. As it turns out, that was an SAT course, right? It was suggested that he take one, right? And so, why did I just come out and say, hey, I need you to take one. I need you to sign up.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what are we doing? We trying to protect ourselves from, from something, from our kid saying no, or from our kid not liking us, or whatever it is. Those expectations are just critical.
Yeah, yeah, that makes so much sense. And just being really clear about what it is that you're actually, yeah, wanting and communicating and kind of explaining, like, this isn't optional. This is something you need to do. So, right, is that kind of like the gist of that?
Yeah, I mean, even as simple as like taking out the trash or asking a 7-year-old to pack his lunch. You know, well, 7-year-old packing their lunch, if they don't know how, if they don't know what your expectations are,
Right.
it's kind of like they're going to go off of what they think, and sometimes that's not always correct. It's not, it's like a curfew for a 17-year-old kid. Hey, if I tell you I'm going to be home, tell me you're going to be home by 11:30, and I say, okay, that's good. Well, does that mean that's my curfew? Right? Because I told you when I was going to be home, right? And you expected me to be home by 11:30, but you never told me I had to be home. So like spelling those kinds of things out, like it's the nuances that like, you don't want as a parent them to be kind of attacked and addressed. So just so hard sometimes. It's no question.
Yeah, yeah. I just laugh because, I mentioned that I have 4 teenagers, and sometimes I forget to tell somebody something because there's 4 of them, and I don't remember. And then I'm telling somebody something twice, and then somebody gets mad because they're like, Mom, you didn't tell me. And I'm like, oh, sorry. Like, I realize it's on me. Like, it was me that didn't make sure I got all 4 of them, and I'm like, I thought I did. And it's just, we're busy. And sometimes it doesn't, I don't close the loop on certain conversations.
Sure. But I mean, at the same time, you could be telling your, 17-year-old something different than you're telling your 14-year-old, but the way that you want it to be kind of carried out is exactly the same.
Mm.
And that's the challenge. It's not just about speaking the same language. It's about, hey, like, making sure the intent of our message is really received and understood.
So what would be like, how do you, I love to give like practical tools to the parents just so that like there's literally something that they're like, aha, I'm going to do this today. Like, what would be some things that like literally somebody could start doing today?
This is very hard for parents, and that is allowing your kid to fail.
Mm.
I mean, I hate to start with something that seems so negative, but that is so tough. And my research at the graduate level is really it's strong in the fact that right now our you know our teens are having a hard time with resilience in a different way, right? Because all of their answers are at their fingertips via their digital device. And so building that, hey, the delayed gratification that they may get, or even delayed answers that they may get, it's so hard. But yet, if we teach them how to fail and it's okay to do that, then we also teach them how to pick themselves up. and that looks different for different families, but it always, in my mind, it always typically looks like, hey, let's admit that failure is okay, and let's pick up the pieces together. Could be as a family, could be as a parent, kid duo, and then you're kind of as a parent watching them pick up the same pieces, and then shifting over to, hey, you got this, and I believe in you, and I believe that you have this, because that's really what's going to build, our future, future leadership, in terms of the kids, right? It's not about delegating. It's really, truly about believing in the fact that kids can do it. We expect, hopefully, that they know what's best for them, but yet somehow, seemingly, we doubt that because we, are helicoptering and we're getting too close oftentimes. And when it comes to executive functioning, that is really, really something that I work with parents about, is that level of support and kind of, scaling that back as the weeks and the months go on. And that doesn't depend on the age. That just depends on the level of support at that moment.
Right, right. I learned, I did some, I got a master's degree as well. And in that time, I learned about the term called scaffolding.
Yep.
And I'm sure you're familiar with it. And for just the average person out there, you think of scaffolding on a building. It's just like that. We're there we want to challenge them, but we don't want to make it too easy or too hard. And so it's just about finding the right balance of how much we're supporting them versus where maybe it's not enough support, right? Maybe a kid is totally failing and totally just doesn't know how to succeed. And so they do need some help and they do need that support. So talk to me about that. Like, how do you find the right balance in a family?
Certainly that again, I have to, as a coach and even as a future, counselor and therapist, I have to figure out that sometimes I got to check my own, beliefs and my own goals at the door. My own values they shouldn't come into play when supporting families. And sometimes that's tough, right? So really the first step is kind of imagining what their family has been kind of built on. I'm working with a high schooler, trying to be general. He has both ADHD and ASD, and his parents are roughly 45 and 50 years older than he is. So his parents are a little bit older, different generation, and so thinking about that balance there can be tough. So scaffolding for them, I created with them a plan of attack to kind of have mom scale back her support. And so that's where the family coaching comes into play. Certainly, working with all three of them, and he's an only child, so working with the parents and the son, making sure that they're on the same page when it comes to the support that is necessary, but also the support that the kid wants. Because not all kids want support, even though parents want to provide that support. And so making sure that there's a balance there, that can be tough. And sometimes for me as a parent myself, I come in and be like, hey, I know, like, this is where failure is an option. Like, I hate to say that, right? But that's where that scaffolding comes in. If we're going to pick up those pieces, let's not identify just the pieces that need to be picked up, but how we are going to do that. And so for many families, for me, I lay that process out, and it looks different. It clearly looks different, but it's really getting to know them,
Yeah.
unquestionably.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And then I would love to hear more. You mentioned that you do research on mindfulness, which is I love that. So how do you bring that into your work and how do you use it? And how does that help kids with executive function challenges?
So, executive functioning challenges when it comes to thinking, you have all of these things just firing at you at the same time, and you're not really sure what to kind of give attention to sometimes. And so you may act impulsively or you may not act at all, which is not necessarily common, but you may have delayed reactions. So mindfulness is really not just let me clear my mind and not think at all. It's not, my meditation, for example, is in my mind is like under mindfulness. Mindfulness is above that. It's a way to manage stress and same as meditation. But when I think of mindfulness, I think of alignment. I think of your thoughts, your actions, and your intent All three of those are aligned. You
Mm,
get there in any number of ways. With excuse me, with my students at the schools I work in, one of the first things I like to do is, and I like to do the 5 4 3 2 1 method, where using their senses, they begin to ground them.
yeah.
We go from there typically to breathing, and then for me, I go from that to what I call thought analysis, which is, what are the facts of the situation, what you have control over, and what's the plan for your action. And so mindfulness for me is kind of using those tools to be grounded, but also not clearing your mind, right? Thoughts are going to come in. We can't always control the thoughts that come in, but we can control what we do with them. If by some chance our executive functioning is such where it's hard for us to control, that's where mindfulness, can begin to help. It takes practice. In my research about with mindfulness, with children, it's best actually you practice as a family,
Oh,
because that way it's not just modeled, it's you're doing it together. It's something fun, right? And if you're a 5 or 6 year old kid and you're trying to learn these skills, and your parents for good reason are not ready to medicate, right? Mindfulness is something as a family that can truly help. It's not always let's get our daughter who is really kind of struggling with we think is executive functioning ADHD, perhaps. Let's get her really really busy so that doesn't even come out, right? When in reality it's going to come out in different settings in different ways. And so working as a family is a really good way to start that process. And truly, using mindfulness to treat things like ADHD can very very much help. The trouble is that our students, they get to where they're stressed, and if they haven't learned those skills, then it makes it really, really hard. And that's where you got to learn these skills when you're feeling great, when you're doing well, when you're practicing when you're doing well. It's not
right.
just breathing.
So, okay, say you have a kid who has homework to do, but they end up cleaning their room or, you know, getting on their phone or doing the thing they're not supposed to do, right? Is that, and I know you said, like, let's say they already know the skill of mindfulness, but is that when you say something like, hey, let's do a mindfulness exercise so that then you can get on track? Is like that when you would use it? Or can you explain that a little more?
That's a great point. One of the things that, and as you're saying this, one of the things that I'm doing with my clients in the upcoming weeks is actually a vision board. And so they're going to create a vision board, and then below that, it's going to have some short-term goals. And so, the vision board traditionally is like long-term goals. And so I like to add, short-term goals. So it's in their room or wherever they're going to do homework. And so it links the two together in the sense of why do they clean and do something else except even doom scrolling, right? Instead of doing their homework. The good thing is that when they see me, if they haven't done their homework, because I was a teacher for a long time, I, I often will stop and be like, hey, look, what can I provide you with support academically, like right now, before we even move on? So at that point, I don't always jump to mindfulness. It does depend on why perhaps they did the other thing first. It could be anxiety based and be like, all right, let's then, think about that. Let's recognize that. Let's recognize that this is going on. You have this worry, you have this concern, and then let's move on. And so when I say it depends, it is depending on the team for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So anything else? This has been such a great conversation. I love talking to somebody who, works with families. So I see a lot of these things too. What are there any last tips that you can give to the listeners today?
I would say this. I would say be patient.
Mm,
And that goes not just with our teens, but with ourselves, right? Um, when I say that I'm world's greatest dad, it's not necessarily a reflection of how I feel about myself. It's the reflection of the job that I feel that I've done with my sons. And so, you know, they're 17 and 20 now, and I feel as though they are really successful. And that's a reflection of the work that I've done as a father, as a husband, and those kinds of things. And so, parents, I would recommend the same. Be patient with yourself, be patient with your team. But along that same lines, failure is an option in some senses, right? And so that it's not really a tip, I guess, like that's actionable. But again, just be patient.
Yeah.
You don't have to rush it. Life is still up there. It's long, hopefully.
Well, I like that. I like that. I think that's great because they'll get there just on their own time frame, I guess. And it's so important to give ourselves some grace because life is stressful enough. The last thing we need is to kind of be hard on ourselves or beating ourselves up for something that it's not perfect yet, right? Like we don't use perfect in our language, but just that it's a process, it's unfolding, it's evolving, and it's the process that really is where the growth is.
Absolutely. Growth
Awesome.
is key. No question.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, Bryan, where can people find you?
So people can find me, online at impactfulmentoring.com. I'm also on, all of the other things like Facebook and Instagram, things like that. So yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll add those links in the show and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you as well.